Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Supporting College Students with ASD presentation. This is a presentation we're going to have monthly webinars that are going to be on the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project. Moving forward, they will always be the second Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. So we'll be getting out announcements on that information, but wanted to let you know that this is the first of a series all around the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project, all around how we can better help you support students with ASD who are transitioning either into post-secondary or the workforce, and really looking at what this project is and how we can better support post-secondary and secondary transition specialists as we move forward with students. My name is Amy Julian. I'm the director for the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support, and I'm here as your moderator today. Just a couple little housekeeping items before we get going. First thing there is that all of you are in listen only mode. So right now your microphones are closed. If you would like to speak and contribute, we absolutely encourage you to raise your hand or post something in the question box and we'll be able to unmute you. In addition to that, you do have a question box there. So right underneath the attendees, you should be able to see your question box and you can post information and questions in there, and we'll be pausing for questions as we move through. If you have any issues with audio, if you go up and you can look under options, I'll give you the call-in option if there's issues with audio as you're moving forward, as everyone is virtual these days. Just always like to make people aware that that is an option moving forward. And then with that, I'm going to hand the floor over to Nikki Michalak. She is the current project coordinator for the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project, and will lead us through the webinar.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Good morning. This is a project that is funded through the Illinois State Board of Education, and we'll give you a little bit more information about that in just a moment. We're going to set this up so that we give a little bit of information on autism, which will set the stage for all of the resources and materials that we're going to talk about in just a moment. So first, I want to begin with the project is based on students with autism and those with related behavior and communication challenges. So I know many of you are coming with very diverse backgrounds and diverse knowledge about autism spectrum disorder. So I want to begin with sharing information that just sets the foundation for a common understanding of autism and the characteristics that are associated with autism. So for some of you, this beginning part might be very review for you, and for others it will catch them up to speed and build that foundation, and hopefully won't be too much information or overwhelming in any way. So we hope to provide you with some great foundation information and also provide you with some new trends that we're seeing within the autism community. And we feel that once you have this basic understanding of autism, you're better able to adapt, modify, and support, as well as teach individuals on the autism spectrum. So the areas that we're going to cover today, like I mentioned, is we're going to give that brief overview of autism spectrum disorder in hopes that it increases your understanding. And then we're going to explore resources as well as materials that are included on the ATTA website. And I will show you where you can access all of those resources. And we'll actually hop over to the website in just a little bit and go through some of the resources that are on the webpage. So a little bit about the project. This will be, Amy, this is our fourth year, correct?
Yes, this is our fourth year with this project, and we've been out and about quite a few places, but still a lot of capacity for sharing the exciting information.
So we started 4 years ago, and what we initially did is we brought stakeholders from across the state together. We knew that ISBE had given us the directive that it needed to be focused on individuals with autism who are transitioning out of high school and entering either the workforce or higher ed. And so that was kind of our direction initially. And so we pulled stakeholders from around the state, people from the public school system, K through 12. We pulled employers, we pulled higher ed, both individuals from community colleges as well as the other colleges and universities around the state. We pulled just some very prominent people in the autism community together, individuals with autism, and we had multiple days where we just planned, what do we want this to target, who what our audience is going to be, and what are the resources and materials that would benefit individuals and those who are supporting individuals on the spectrum. We'll talk a little bit more about where this is coming from. As we have seen, we'll talk about the numbers and individuals who have been diagnosed with autism. That prevalence rate over the past 20 years has gone up significantly. And so what we're seeing is almost a wave of individuals who are going through that public school system and then exiting. And we know that our adult service providers, as well as our employers and colleges, are not, they could be more prepared to support individuals on the spectrum. And so that's where a little bit of this comes from, is how can we do a better job on providing services and support to those individuals who are leaving that high school setting. And so what we identified from that group was a portal, a web portal. And on your screen, you can see 6 different areas. So we identified the secondary school system. We identified young adults or students with autism themselves, the post-secondary world, so those who are entering or those who work in higher ed at the college level, communities, what can we do in our communities to support individuals who are at that transition age, families, and we'll talk a little bit more about families as we go on, and then employers. As we know, individuals with autism and those with related behavior and communication challenges are very, very awesome employees. So how can we get employers on board, and what are some resources and supports that we can provide to employers as well as individuals on the spectrum so that they can be successful in a work environment? So each of these are different portals. So when you go to our website, and I'll show you in a little bit, you can go in and you can click on any one of these different areas, and there will be resources that are within each of those areas. And sometimes the resources cross over, so they might be included in more than one area. So for instance, we have a tool that supports individuals' social communication. And so that tool or that resource might be in that employment section. It might also be in secondary, because we need to focus and work on teaching social communication skills while we have students in that high school setting. And then also there's some self-assessments that focus on social communication for young adults themselves. And so you might see the same resource. It might be tweaked a little bit, but it is contextualized to meet each of those different audiences or those different portals. So we'll go through and explain some of this in a little bit more depth in a moment. First, we're going to start off with a resource that we have that is in multiple of those different areas, and that is what is autism spectrum disorder. And so this is a resource that is able to be downloaded, but it's just a foundational fact sheet on what is autism spectrum disorder, because there are a lot of myths out there and people truly don't know what is autism spectrum disorder. So any resource that is on our portal is able to be downloaded. We do have lots and lots of copies of them. And so if you ever see us out and about when we're doing trainings, or if we're at an event where you're at, feel free to ask and we can share some of these with you. But you are able to download them. But just briefly, to make sure that we all have a common understanding, what is autism spectrum disorder? Well, autism is a neurologically based developmental disorder. So that means it is originated in the brain and impacts the nervous system, and it's a developmental disorder. And autism impacts an individual's ability to communicate, to socially interact, and then also engage in developmentally appropriate behaviors. And it typically appears within the first 3 years of life. And we'll talk a little bit more about that onset in just a moment. But you're taking a look at your screen right now, and on that screen, you'll see 2 different umbrellas. On the left, you see different names that you might be familiar with that are related to autism or once were considered autism. And then on your right, you see autism spectrum disorder underneath that umbrella. So the way that we used to diagnose autism was based on the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And that outlines the criteria for how an individual might get diagnosed. And so within the umbrella on the left, that's how we used to diagnose autism. There were 5 different pervasive developmental disorders. There was autism, there was Asperger's, there was childhood disintegrative disorder, Rett's, and then pervasive developmental disorder. And you're probably asking yourself, why is she sharing this? Well, it's not uncommon to hear individuals still talk about Asperger's and Asperger's disorder. And so I wanted you to be aware that the way that we now diagnose simply falls underneath this autism spectrum disorder umbrella. And there's different levels. There's level 1 through level 3 based on the support need that an individual needs. So someone with a level 1 requires different supports than an individual who requires level 3 support. And so this was a change that was made in the most recent DSM-5, which was released in 2013. So a couple of years ago, about 7 years ago. And they removed some of these other PDDs. So Rett's disorder is no longer considered an autism spectrum disorder because Rett's disorder has a medical diagnosis. There are multiple genes. It's like the MCE3P or P3 gene is the cause of Rett syndrome. And so it's actually removed from the DSM. The same with childhood disintegrative disorder that is characterized by a period of regular development and a rapid loss of skill. There is a medical and cause behind that. And so really autism spectrum disorder then kind of is that umbrella term for the entire spectrum. And as you know, if you have worked with someone with autism, it is definitely a spectrum disorder. So it's not uncommon to still hear people talk about having Asperger's. The Asperger community is very much a culture and a community, much like the deaf community. And so when this change happened, there are many individuals who felt like their label, what they identified as, was being torn away or taken away from them. And so it's still not uncommon to hear individuals talk about Asperger's. So I just want you to be aware that if you hear Asperger's, it is an autism spectrum disorder. It just might be how that person identifies. And going a little bit more in depth about autism, it is lifelong. There are supports that we can put in place that help an individual to be successful, but there is no cure. Also, early intervention is the best predictor for success and the future impact of ASD. And what's really kind of interesting is if we think back to when early intervention really came through and started was in the early 2000s, late 1990s, early 2000s, which is also when we started seeing an increase in that prevalence of autism spectrum disorder. So this is you put it together, and we have individuals who are being diagnosed in the late 1990s and early 2000s, and then we had that increase of early intervention. And so we're seeing lots of individuals now who have so many more skills, whose outcomes have been positively impacted, and now they are leaving high school and entering higher ed. They're looking for jobs. And so could this also be a result of the fantastic things that early intervention has done? It's given those individuals the skills that they have needed to be successful. And so now we're seeing so many people leave high school and looking for employment and looking to move on to higher ed, which is just fantastic. But then on the flip side is we have these two systems that are not prepared yet for students on the spectrum. And so that's one of the big reasons that this project started, is what can we do? We know there's lots of different supports and resources for children in that K through 12 system, but a lot of that research has not carried over to adults yet. However, many of those same strategies, the supports that we put in place, the evidence-based practices are very effective. And so how can we take what we know works for the younger individuals and carry it over into these different systems for adults? So a lot of the resources that we have developed are based upon that. When we look at an individual with autism, we know that every individual is going to be very different from one another. However, there's these core areas that are impacted. That includes social communication, it includes behavior, and it also includes sensory. And so those are the three main areas that an individual might be impacted. And again, once you've met one person with autism, you have met one person with autism. So additionally on this slide, we have individuals with the same diagnosis may often have different needs that are unique to them, and that autism manifests itself differently in different people. So not the way that the social communication impacts one person is going to be very different than it impacts a different person, and that's the same with behavior and sensory. And this next slide kind of explains that even more. So again, on the left here, communication, behavior, social, sensory, and cognition, these are just different areas in which an individual might be impacted. And then you have the continuum within each of those areas. So when we take a look at communication, we have an individual who might be primarily nonverbal, meaning they don't have a lot of language, but that does not mean that they don't communicate. And then if you look at the other end, we have individuals who are hyperverbal. Oftentimes they might be referred to as little professors when they're like 8 or 9 years old, just because of the words that they use. They might use words like epiphenomenological in their everyday language, and that is a mouthful for me just to get out. But those are the type of words that an individual might use, and we refer to that as being hyperverbal. They use lots and lots of words in their communication and language. When we look at behavior, we have individuals who are very aggressive, and that could be towards other people, or it could be self-injurious behavior where it's biting or hitting themselves. And then on the opposite end of that continuum, we have individuals who are just a little odd, who their behavior just is a little different than other people. When we think of social, we have individuals who are very self-absorbed and very into themselves, isolate themselves. And then we have individuals who are just very quirky and don't really understand social boundaries. This might be the person when you get in an elevator, they stand right next to you and makes you a little uncomfortable. They're in your bubble when you have the entire space for them to be. Sensory, we have one end where it's hyposensitive, meaning it takes a whole lot more of that sensation for the individual to feel it. And then you have hypersensitive, where it just takes a very little bit of a sensation for them to feel it. An example of this is a good friend and colleague in our community, Marty Murphy, has a very hypersensitive system. And so she might be out, well, not really right now out at a restaurant, but maybe she would be sitting outside, and an individual or a server might come up to her and touch her shoulder and say, "What can I get you to drink?" And that light touch on her shoulder is painful for her. And so she will ask someone to hit her because it's deep pressure that calms her system. And so we have a lot of individuals who are tactile defensive, or maybe certain sounds like when the heaters kick on or an air conditioner kicks on, that is actually painful for that individual's ears. And then cognition is another area. And it was once thought that upwards of 50 to 75% of individuals with autism had a cognitive impairment. However, we know that that is, I think the data for that is more between 30 and 45% now that actually have a intellectual impairment. And in fact, we have many individuals who have above average intellect. And so there's that whole range again on a continuum of how an individual's cognitive functioning is impacted. But it's a lot less than we originally thought. And that really probably comes back to communication. Autism is a communication-based disorder. And how do we test individuals' cognition? Well, usually it's with a standardized test, which is a language-based test. And so we're actually assessing in one of the weakest areas. So now with different modes of assessment and ways to gather that information, we have a better understanding of the actual number of individuals who do have a cognitive impairment. And so it's given us some new data. And this slide is probably pretty familiar to many of you who are working with individuals on the spectrum. This comorbidity, we have at least 70% of individuals on the spectrum have at least one additional comorbid challenge. Some of them include OCD or anxiety. Anxiety is a big one, depression, epilepsy is another one, and then sometimes learning disabilities go right along with that. And so those are some of the other challenges that if you are working with an individual with autism that you might need to support as well. And then quickly touching on the prevalence rate, we have seen over the years a rapid increase in the number of individuals who are diagnosed with autism. So right now, back in the beginning of April, we saw an additional increase. Every 2 years, the CDC releases newer prevalence data. And so the most recent numbers are 1 in 54 children have an autism spectrum disorder. We know it is 4 times more likely in males than it is in females. And so we're getting better at diagnosing females. Females just present themselves a little bit differently, and so their characteristics don't look the same as a boy's. And so it looks a little bit different, but we are doing a better job diagnosing females with autism. The other thing that is different in this more recent prevalence increase is that we are seeing an increase in the number of adults that are being diagnosed. And this was a change in the way that diagnosis has happened previously. In the old DSM, it was a lot harder for an adult to receive a diagnosis. And in the new DSM, it's a little bit easier because they just have to be able to show that these characteristics have always been there, which is a little bit easier to do. The prevalence in boys is 1 in 37, and the prevalence currently in females is 1 in 50 or 151, sorry, 151. And so we can still see that boys definitely are being diagnosed more often than girls. When we take a look at Illinois, our numbers, this is for students who are receiving services underneath the eligibility criteria of autism spectrum disorder, and this is new data as of the beginning of this year. So currently there are 28,473 students who are receiving services underneath that eligibility criteria of autism spectrum disorder. And what that tells us is we have a lot of students who are receiving services, but we know that it doesn't account for all students. And that is for a couple of different reasons. First of all, it could be that the student doesn't have an educational impact. There is no educational impact, meaning that they don't have an IEP for autism. And so they don't qualify for services underneath that eligibility criteria. So they may also be receiving services in a different eligibility area, such as OHI or other health impairment. They might have a 504 plan, or they might receive services underneath speech and language. And so what this tells us is that there are a lot of kids coming through our system. And if you look at that trend line going up, it has been a steady increase over the past 20 couple years. So we are also seeing more students receiving services in our school system. Are there any questions yet? We're gonna stop talking about some of these foundation characteristics and dive into some of the other supports in a moment. Okay, I'll hop right along. All right, we know that as of this year, there were supposed to be 500,000 children with autism expected to reach adulthood. So we're seeing more and more students age out of that public school system. And now we're going to talk about some data that is pretty bleak. 35% of young adults between the ages of 19 and 23 have not had a job or received postgraduate education after leaving high school. So this is kind of doom and gloom. We know students are leaving that secondary system, but they're not really doing a whole lot. Oftentimes I've heard they're just hanging out in their parents' basement. They don't want to be though. It's not for a lack of effort, it's just our adult service world and higher ed and employers, we've got to do a better job. And so there's some more data I'd like to share with you as we talk about post-secondary education. We do know that we are seeing more and more students with autism access higher ed. However, with that said, we truly don't know how many students. Why is that? Well, we know once the systems change, once a student's in K through 12, we know that we can count every student. We have parents as advocates. We have really good data on the number of students, as I showed you just a moment ago, who are receiving services underneath that eligibility criteria of autism. That doesn't transfer over once we get into higher ed. And so the only way we know if a student has autism, if they are on a campus, is if they have disclosed that information to the disability office, services or accommodation support office. And so we don't have good data. All we can do is we can estimate that about 2% of a college population might have an autism spectrum disorder. And we know that that's probably a very low number. But again, if people aren't disclosing, we don't truly know how many individuals are accessing college. And what's a little bit scarier to look at is there's an 80% incompletion rate. So individuals are coming, but they're not staying. And one of the reasons we found, the research from across the United States has shown, is students are not prepared in those areas of social communication as well as executive functioning. And that is an area that our universities and our colleges are doing a better job supporting, but it's not the standard accommodations that a student would receive. It's not the extended time or the separate room that truly benefits an individual. It's those social supports. It's the time management. It is goal setting. It's helping with the planning of different assignments and the work that needs to be done in those classes. And so across the board, students are entering unprepared in that social communication area as well as executive functioning. And so that's something for those of you who are here today from that college setting, that's something to think about, is what can we do to better prepare students as we think about that social impact, and then how can we better support the executive functions of individuals. And we have a few resources to share. So on the website, you will see underneath the post-secondary portal, there is this resource. And I use this resource oftentimes when I'm doing trainings for faculty. It's a great resource. We know many of our faculty and staff have not had prior information on autism spectrum disorder. And so this is just a great resource to be able to share with faculty members. It gives a brief overview of what is autism spectrum disorder. It talks about those different areas that could be impacted: communication, social interactions, behavior, as well as sensory. It talks about what it might look like in a classroom. So what are some of those characteristics that you might see in a student who is on the autism spectrum? It talks about some of the strengths, because as many challenges as an individual has, there are just as many strengths, if not more. And so what are the benefits? How can we use some of those characteristics as a strength-based model, and talk about how this allows them to be able to have such a narrow focus and really focus in on a topic? How can we use this to talk about the productivity and the positive sides or strengths of an individual and what they bring to the classroom? And then the bottom part on that second page really talks about, well, what can we do? What are some strategies that we could put in place that would not only benefit individuals on the spectrum, but truly benefit all students? I know one thing that I have done when I teach a college class is I have taken my syllabus and I have broken it down week by week, but not only just a broad overview, I have done checkbox systems where my syllabus ends up being 20 some pages, but it is almost like I am giving that information up front as to what is due when, what is the order of the work that I need to do for a week. And being able to provide those details really supports an individual with autism, because it doesn't leave them guessing. It's very black and white, and it gives them the information that they need. And what I have found is it benefits all students. So that is a great thing about a lot of these resources that we're going to cover, is they're not only helpful for individuals on the spectrum, they're helpful for all students. And so this is another resource, like I said, that you can find underneath that post-secondary portal on the website. And then focus on employment. We know that it is the disability, autism is the disability with the highest level of unemployment. In fact, over 85% of individuals with autism are unemployed. And there's lots of different reasons for that. So we also prioritized employment as an area in which we wanted to dive in and develop supports for, so that we can engage employers in seeing the benefits of hiring individuals with autism, and also help employers understand what supports they can put in place to help an individual be successful in a work environment. 50% of young adults between the ages of 20 to 26 have held a job outside of their household. So only 50%. That's not a huge number of students who are seeking employment. We know that there are employers who do a very good job, and we know that there are employers who could do a better job. So I'll take you over to the website in a minute and show you some of the resources that we have put together for employers as they seek to better support individuals on the spectrum. And then one last resource that you'll find on our website, it's not a part of those, the portals, the audiences, but we also developed a resource that is specific to remote learning for individuals with ASD. And so you can find that, I'll show you where it is on the website, but it does a beautiful job overviewing what are the supports that we can put in place. And it's not only for individuals in that K through 12 system, because the same supports and resources would be effective for a college student or an adult on the spectrum, but it talks about how do we explain the information and what are some supports that we can put in place? How can we better understand behavior that we might be seeing? How can we better support a sensory system? How can we understand the different behaviors that we're seeing right now? Because this change over the past 4 months has really thrown off our regular routine and our regular schedules. And so I'll show you also where we can access this resource. So I'm going to hop over really quick and try to open up an internet browser. Are there any questions, Amy? I'm going to pause my screen really quick while I shift things around.
So yeah, I'm not seeing any questions in the question box. I've been putting some fun things in the chat. Again, please raise your hand if you'd like to be unmuted, and I'm happy to unmute you and you can ask a question. But the information that she shared about the top 10 documents and then also the COVID resources, I shared both of those in the chat box, so you have direct links there. And just looking to see here if we have any hands raised. Don't be shy. You have a question, feel free to ask any questions. But at this time, Nikki, it looks like there are no questions.
Okay, so I am going to share the web portal. The web portal is autismcollegeandcareer.com. That's how you can access the website. And then you can see right here at the top underneath the logo is resources for supporting students during COVID. It is available on our website. It is also available on the COVID site on ISBE's webpage. And so it's easily accessible on both pages. I had done a previous webinar on it, so we have a link to the webinar. And so that can be viewed at your pleasure. There's a link to download the entire document, and then you can just skip to a section. And so you can have supporting, oh, this actually links you to the, oh goodness, where's my website? My browser is bigger than my window and I can't, oh, there we go, I got the right button. So each one of these buttons down here links you to a Google Drive where there are plenty of resources that help an individual in each of these areas. So there's lots of different social narratives and social stories and understanding or support understanding that explain COVID, explain social distancing, explain why school is closed, why things are different right now, why I have to wear a mask, why I have to stand 6 feet apart from someone. And so this might be somewhere where you can go and download, and then it helps you not have to reinvent the wheel. So those are all of those resources. You can download the whole document by clicking here. And again, there's the webinar, and I'm going to try my best to click back. I have no idea what I'm clicking right now, though, so I can't really see. I might end up Xing out by accident. Oh my goodness. All right, maybe I can just, there we go. Oh, it came. Come on, browser. Oh, goodness. There we go. I got back somehow. I wonder if I can, I don't want to have to do this every time. I think I might have to open up a different browser so that I can go toggle back and forth. Okay. So this is the secondary system. So here you have, there's an overview. And then you go into each one of these areas and you can see here is the toolbar up on top. All of the resources will be accessed by clicking on resources. I am going to show you one of these videos. We have a quick overview video in most of the areas. That is another thing that we are working on this year. Here is the secondary system.
Transition planning refers to the process by which a student moves from middle school to high school and from high school to adult life. For students with autism spectrum disorder, the transition from high school to post-school options is a complex process that requires planning and coordination to ensure appropriate supports and positive outcomes. In the state of Illinois, the transition process should begin by age 14 and a half or earlier and includes the student, educators, families, and other members of the educational team in order to begin the important task of developing a transition plan that outlines the student's experience, educational services, supports, and post-secondary goals. Effective transition planning is a multi-year process that leads students to better post-school outcomes, such as employment or college, as well as participation in their communities. Each student's transition plan should be unique and tailored to their individual needs, interests, skills, and strengths. By systematically addressing the transition process, students with ASD will be prepared. The middle and high school section overviews tools and resources specific to educators to aid in the development of a comprehensive transition plan.
So each one of the portal areas has a short little video like that, or will soon, that overviews what is included in each area. So then when we hop over to the resources tab, not only does this include the resources that we have developed, it also includes resources at the local level, so other resources within our state as well as national. And so resources from across the United States. Autism Speaks has a fantastic transition toolkit, and so we have it linked here. So not only did we want to share the resources that we've developed, but there's some awesome, really good resources that other organizations have come up with, and so we wanted to share those as well. We wanted it to be a hub where you could come and access all of these resources instead of trying to figure it out on your own. Some of the things that we have put in place, this is a really important one, is oh goodness, that's one I didn't catch. There's a resource that outlines supports that are available in the high school setting, and then how those change, the entitlement laws change when a student accesses higher ed. Let's go for a syllabus review. This is a document that we can use to support an individual in better understanding a syllabus. As I mentioned earlier, one of my syllabi ended up being, I think, 25 pages long, which is a lot of information. So then how can we help an individual prioritize that information? And so this is just a one-page syllabus review where we can go through and highlight the important information. So it's just a great resource to help them attach to the top of their syllabi so that they can say, okay, here's the important information, here's where I need to go. Instead of digging through, it's an easier way to access that information. So that is how to access that. Let me try to get out of here again. I'm gonna have to change my display size. There we go. Let me see if I can pull it down now. So those are some of the resources that are within the secondary. When we go into students, young adults, this has another video you can go up to, and it has a description of what resources would be included. You can go into resources and find different resources here. I'll show you some of those. We also have a self-assessment area. And so This is a resource. The student self-assessment short is a short, it's 8 pages. This was actually a document that was used by Marshall University when they interview students to be accepted. They have a phenomenal autism program on their campus. And so this was something that was used in their interview process. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, well, if this is what students are being evaluated or assessed on, then this would be a great tool to use in the high school setting as we prepare individuals to enter or access higher ed. And so we worked with a lot of high schools that are using this tool to help build in goals into the student's transition plan. So it covers the areas of academics, independent living, socialization, sexuality, safety and health, stress, and personal insight. And so we have students go through and they self-assess, and then a teacher can go through and also assess, and then they can come down here and they can write their average scores or their scores. They can prioritize areas, and then teachers often take this area here where they prioritize skills, and that's where they write transition goals for. And we wrote it so that it could be assessed multiple times throughout the year. And so you can go back through and students can self-assess and teachers can assess again. Beyond that, we wanted it to be a profile, a student profile. Like, here are the things that I'm really good at, because we don't always want to focus on where the areas of growth need to be, but we want to focus on what am I doing really well. So there's a profile attached to the end of this document. So what's a summary of the student's strengths? And that would include anything that was a rating of a 4 or 5. And then what are some strategies that are effective for that student? And then what are some needs of that student? And what we can find are what are those strategies that are good and work well for an individual, because then we can take some of those strategies and we can apply them to different areas when there are struggles or challenges. And so it covers each one of those areas, and you can identify those strengths and those needs. But like I said, this is also used not only as a self-assessment, but for students who want to self-assess and teachers who want to build in resources into that transition plan. The student environment self-assessment, this is a document that has been helpful for employers. We also have one that is a classroom self-assessment. It's not labeled classroom, it's just the environmental summary. And so it's an assessment that helps an individual identify what of those different sensory systems might be impacted within an environment. This one is tailored to the work environment, just so an individual can help identify what might be an environment that is conducive and would work for an individual. Because if, for instance, someone has a very hyper olfactory system, then the certain smells may not be a good fit for that individual. So you can go through and you can rate. This includes noise levels, smells, temperature, touch and texture, lighting, social navigation, job tasks, physical requirements, and work hours. And so it helps an individual as they start doing that job exploration meet the different individual needs of that individual. So like I said, there's a couple of different versions of this tool so that an individual can be successful matching their needs to the environment. So back to the resources area, we have a whole section on interviewing tips, interviewing an assessment. So we have the tips, which is just a checklist that talks about different things you might want to do when you're interviewing. This matches that tool and it goes over what are some things that I need to do before the interview, during the interview, and then again after the interview. And so you can role play with the individual, and you can also identify what are areas that are a 1 that I might want to work on before they go and actually engage in an interview. So just some other resources to help prep for that interview, because we know interviewing is a very hard task. All right, let me try my back button. That's not it. I'm going in blind here trying to find the back button. It's not working for me. Oh my goodness. I must hit the same button because it keeps refreshing this page. There we go. And then so that's the tips assessment and then the interviewing tips. Here's a resource I wanted to show you when I initially started talking about it, social communication. It is, again, another self-assessment where you can talk about different areas of social communication and how do I work with other people? How do I follow directions? What do I do if I'm given negative feedback about my work? Do I respond calmly to the information? If I do not know how to respond, do I know who to direct the customer to? So different aspects of social communication that someone might want to consider if they're going to be working with people. And again, this is just to kind of test out different areas and help support an individual so that they can be successful if they have to rely on using their social skills. All right, come on, look. This is another really good one. And again, this is one that's important for probably all of those different portal areas. It talks about disclosure. We know disclosure is very, very important for individuals. It's also a very personal choice. So how can we support a person to share information about their diagnosis if they feel that it's important or that it's a need? And it also talks about advocating and how can I advocate for myself. And one way of advocating for myself is sharing information on what my needs might be. And so this talks about what do you do or what do you want this particular person to know about your diagnosis? How do you think disclosure will improve your interactions? Are you prepared to ask this person to support you in a different way because you have shared this new information? What are the benefits of disclosing? And are there any risks that there might be in disclosing information? And then it talks about some tips to successful disclosure. And so this is just another resource about how do I disclose, which we know many students might need support on. Advocating and self-determination is something that we really work on in that K through 12 system. And so this is just another tool to support that. Have any questions popped up, Amy?
We do not have any questions. Again, if you'd like to raise your hand, I can see you all out there. If you'd like to raise your hand or if you have any questions, go ahead and post those in the question box. If you are on the app, it does say question chat box. So I hope that hasn't led to any confusion. Everything that I've been posting is in the chat, but you should be able to post right there as well. And just let us know if there's any questions, comments, concerns. But at this time, Nikki, there doesn't seem to be any.
Okay, I'm opening up a new browser so that I don't have to deal with the problem that I've been having. I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so that was in the post-secondary area. Hopping down to community, we've got some housing resources that are going to be going up. Again, that autism disclosure resource. When we talk about families, families is a really big area because a lot of our families have been advocating and have been that that students' #1 advocate while they've been in that K through 12 system, and then we know the laws change. And so what are the resources that are available to families to help them better understand these changes? Here's that timeline document that talks about how can I be preparing my student or my child as we transition from high school to college. So what should I be doing when they're a freshman through a senior? What do I need to know about admission, about interviewing? So all of these different different things that a parent might want to take in consideration as they are going to be transitioning their student to college. Here is the support changes from high school to college. So we talked about the different laws that are available to students to support students when they're in high school and how that changes to when they're in college. When they're in high school, they have IDEA. When they enter college, they have ADA. And so there's lots of differences between the two. Entitlement. And so this just really does a great job overviewing it because sometimes it might seem like a service cliff to families. And so this will help them better understand what their rights are and how to access resources and services. Again, when should I disclose my autism? And then the other resources, employers. So some of the resources that I like to share with you here include a, how do I get the best from an employee with autism? So if I am hiring or looking to hire an individual with autism, what can I do as an employer? So I can be precise and specific about job instructions. I can be specific about what is rigid, so what has to say this way, and where can I be flexible? Make logical lists and steps. How many of you guys are to-do list makers? I know I am, and I feel great success when I'm able to cross things off my list. Sometimes I add things that weren't on my list just so I can cross them off, and that's very rewarding to me. And we know that that is also something that works really well for a lot of individuals with autism, is just making lists, writing out the tasks that are supposed to be completed. Filling in missing information. Slowly release and responsibility. So fade that support over time. Try to give advance notice of changes. Encourage a collaborative culture. Be receptive to requests for accommodations. Provide ongoing and regular feedback. And go ahead, be blunt and straightforward. Share that information. We have, again, here's another really good one, job description template. So oftentimes we have taken and helped employers change how their job description and the information that they have included so that it is more, less wordy, I guess would be a good way to say it, and more specific for an individual to easier understand. So you can pull it just what are those job duties and responsibilities, what are the skills that are needed? And then this is actually, we're able to modify this to meet the demands of the job. So instead of endurance, it might be a different word. Or if it's not movement, or if it is movement, you can list the different indicators that an individual might need to do as a part of those job responsibilities. We can have sensory levels. We can pull information straight from that work environment assessment and put it right in here so an individual knows how their sensory system might be impacted, what the work schedule might be. So it just helps modify that job description to be easier to understand. And then why should I hire somebody? What makes a person with autism, what are their strengths? So trustworthy, dependable, loyal employees, strong detail, intense attention, narrow focus, untapped talent, visual thinkers, great problem solvers, their integrity. They are going to be the person that shows up to work every single day. They're probably going to have increased productivity because they're not going to engage in all of the social communication that some of us may do when we are at work. They have perseverance. They will have a very great attention to detail with specific interest on certain tasks and can hyper focus. You will have them for a very long time. And not only that, the supports that we're going to put in place not only benefit an individual with autism, they benefit all people. And so those are a very quick overview of the resources and supports that are included within each of these 6 different audience areas. In addition to these resources, we do trainings. So we can come out and provide faculty training, staff trainings on autism or anything related to autism, workplace, college, whatever your needs are. So please reach out if you need more information. Hop onto the website, navigate it. If you see something or you want something modified, reach out to us. We want to be responsive to the needs of the students and individuals that you are working with. So if you see something that is missing, please reach out and we will happily problem solve with you and try to create a resource or provide some type of support that would benefit everybody. So I hope this gives you a better understanding of the Autism Technical Assistance Training and Technical Assistance Project. And I hope that you're walking away with at least one new idea and a new resource of how you can support an individual on the spectrum. Please let me know if there's any questions, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Nikki. That was fantastic. Yes, if there are any questions, I'm not seeing any pop up. I did want to let everyone know a couple last minute things here. Our next webinar in this series will be August 11th. It's at 10 a.m. As I said, we're going to meet the second Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. and have webinars around the Autism Training and Technical Assistance Project. In addition to that, we are expanding our team. And so if you're interested in this work and interested in this project, yes, this is my shameless plug to let you know that this team is expanding and we would love to have you join us. So check out ISU's page or check out our website, ICSPS's website, where it shows join our team, and there is a position there if you're interested. And then lastly, I just wanted to pause one more second or chat one more second so you have an opportunity to ask any questions.
I
I want to
see
thank you
Andrea
all.
has her hand raised.
Oh, Andrea, let me unmute you so you can share. There you go, Andrea.
Hi, ladies. Can you hear me?
Yay!
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, for everyone else on the call, my name is Andrea Shryock. I support this project as part of ISBE Special Education Department. We fund this grant project, and I wanted to really just say thank you to Nikki and Amy, as always, for providing such extensive knowledge around autism and the needs that we have in our community and out in the field, and providing the utmost support and providing comprehensive services and supports for us all. I did want to note just a few things. As part of the ISBE Department of Special Education, we are involved with the Autism Task Force. We do have a representative that sits on that and engages with other interagency communications and conversations around autism, and our particular involvement in that task force is sharing about post-secondary services and support. We have always shared the information that the project has for us, the Autism Technical and Training and Technical Assistance. So again, thank you, Nikki and Amy. We will continue to do so. This is such a comprehensive presentation that I really look forward to sharing that with the task force so it gets out to all different areas across the state and fields. Another note that I wanted to make is I did see that we have a few of our staff that serve on our SPP Indicator 13 team that focuses on secondary and post-secondary transitioning. So I know that these members that are on the call are pretty excited about this presentation and how they may better support your project, better support the field by sharing this information. So I look forward to getting access to a link. And with that said, that's a good transition. The link will be posted on our website. As many of you know, our special education department with ISBE is transitioning into a new accountability and support system for LEA determinations and monitoring of districts across the state. This has been a yearly process. We are rolling the process out in September. Website additions and our increasing support and resources are our last task. So be looking back, checking back to our website in August. All of the information from this particular project, as well as many, many others, and national supports and additional links will all be included on our website, our special education website. So please refer back to our ISBE special education page at that time. And again, thank you, Nikki and Amy, for once again providing us all with such comprehensive, extensive information. You are great as always. And on behalf of Special Education Department at ISBE, thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And I put that website in the chat so you guys can all see that. So be sure you check on that frequently. There's a lot of wonderful things coming out of the State Board of Education, Special Education Department, and State Board of Education as a whole. So be sure you're checking on those great resources because they are working diligently to be not only reactive but also proactive as we are in this crazy brave new world that we found ourselves in. So thank you all for your time today. It is 11 on the hour. Nikki put her email out there as well. And so if you have any questions, please be sure you ask. We're here to support you. We're here to help, as Nikki has said, and Andrea has said as well. So thank you also very much for your time today, and have a wonderful afternoon. And we hope to see you in August.
Thanks, everybody.